This is Heath Mulliken from the Techology Show. We're here at General Conference 2012. I'm standing between two great men and two heroes of mine, Dr. Keith Drury, Dr. Bob Black, who are the authors of The Story of the Wesleyan Church. Dr. Drury, I just want to ask you, why was now the right time for a book like this?
Well, for a couple reasons. We've kind of had a temporary book done sort of after merger. We're 50 years now beyond merger. We had a kind of a temporary book done. Talk about that, Bob.
It's called The Outline History of the Wesleyan Church, and it was supposed to be the basis for the denominational history, which did come out in '92, I think, Reformers and Revivalists. But when Reformers and Revivalists came out, it was 700 pages long. It's very exhaustive. It had every general conference, every major leader in some detail. And so what we wanted to do was, number one, write a narrative, a story that was more reader-oriented than researcher-oriented, although we hope it's valid for the researcher too. But the second reason is it's been 20 years since '92, and a lot has happened. A lot of very historic things have happened in those 20 years.
And after a historic general conference like this, they're going to have to start on the next one. Now, Dr. Drury, you come from the Pilgrim Hall.
Next week.
That's right.
WesleyanHistory.org. That's what that's going to be. We're going to write up history as we go. We're going to write up history as we go.
So WesleyanHistory.org is not just a website to buy the book; it's a website to engage the book.
It's got a number of resources, and that's one of them. It's kind of a history in the making kind of resource that will pick up history as it happens.
So if you're a young pastor out there, your story is literally being written. You came more from the Pilgrim Holiness side. Was there anything in your research that you discovered that you didn't know before?
Well, a couple little things. I think probably the big theme that comes out of this is we probably, as a denomination, embraced more than ever before the Pilgrim's early history and its connection with God's Bible School. I mean, people closer to that sort of reject, sort of like, let's pretend we didn't start that way. Right. Oh, right. Everything we're talking about in this general conference, that's what they did in Cincinnati. Yeah. You know, hey, good, we find a bunch of prostitutes, let's have a home. Hey, unwed mother, let's have a home. Right. Hey, let's disobey the law. I mean, for a lot of years after merger, we're trying to get away from that. Now I think we're kind of embracing. They're models now for what we want to do now.
And from the Wesleyan Methodist side, Dr. Black, any new insight or stories that you found?
Some new stories, some new people that we highlight. George Pegler, for instance, who seemed to be almost like the Forrest Gump of the Wesleyan Methodist Church. He was there when history happened again and again and again and again. He built the chapel that became the Seneca Falls National Historic Site when the Women's Convention was held there, and all sorts of things. The first discipline was written in his house in Utica. He was the pastor of the host church at Utica. Well, it's not that people didn't know that, but it wasn't woven into the story before. And in fact, I think from my point of view, from the Wesleyan Methodist side, it was more things that we had known, but they hadn't been connected. For example, first missionaries went to Sierra Leone. Everybody knows that. What wasn't realized was that the slaves on the slave ship Amistad who rebelled, took the ship, and then got tricked into sailing back into American waters and were captured, freed by the Supreme Court, one of the great decisions of the Supreme Court. Those slaves were, their trial, their legal defense was funded by Lewis Tappan. Lewis Tappan used the rest of the Amistad Defense Fund to support abolitionist missionaries, including the Wesleyans in North Carolina, and then the slaves on the Amistad went back, and guess where they went back to? Sierra Leone. That was their home. And so when the Wesleyans a few years later say we need to send our first missionaries, they didn't just stab their finger on a map and say Sierra Leone's a good place. They had a reason for going there. And so one of the things the story does is connect the dots of a lot of the things that we have known before.
That's amazing. What is your what's your hope for this book? And as we continue to write the history of the story of the Wesleyan Church from this general conference, what's your hope for the book and for the church?
Well, it'll be a fun read. It is a fun read. It's just we had a guy here at general conference bought a book, went over to his room, spent the entire night, read the entire book, came back the next morning bleary-eyed and said, "Man, amazing book." I mean, it's a good story. The captions, pictures, a lot of pictures, stuff like that. That's sort of our first hope, is that people are going to enjoy the history of the church. More important is, though, who we were does tell us kind of who we want to be. You don't write history without writing with a purpose. So we're picking stories. You leave other stories out. We told the stories of kind of the story of this General Conference. The emphasis of this General Conference, a lot what we told in our book. This is who we were. This is who they were, who we want to be. So you find models in there, models of people you want to be like.
Right. Dr. Black, what about you? What's your hope for the book and for the church?
One of the things that I think comes out of the book that I hope will affect the church in the future is that we tried not to gloss over the areas where the church fumbled the ball. Where during the civil rights movement, for example, we were not active and on the stage as we should have been. And if that's at least noted in a history, it can make a difference maybe in future decisions. And when we see another crossroads of history ahead of us, maybe we'll look back to that crossroads that we missed and say, how can we be truer to our mission than we've been before?
They're Dr. Keith Drury, Dr. Bob Black. The book is The Story of the Wesleyan Church. If you go to wesleyanhistory.org, it takes you to buy the book. You can find all the other resources. Gentlemen, thank you for your great work and for your contributions to the entire church.